I'm Dakota Johnson.
I'm Isabella Merced.
Celeste O'Connor.
Hi, I'm Mike Seibert.
And I'm Sydney Sweeney. Madam Web is in theaters February 14th.
You in?
Madam Web, exclusively in movie theaters.
We're about to start the show. We talk about stuff and things. Lots of guests, in-depth interviewing. Mike Seibert Radio. It's nobody's favorite show. Movies, comics, video games, and TV. And we also can guarantee that it's not gonna be that funny. But that's okay because the show is free. So crank the volume into your headphones. The podcast at last is starting. It's time for Mike Seibert Radio.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome back to Mike Seibert Radio. I am your host, and today we are going to be talking about the movie that the studio didn't want me to see. It is the latest Spider-Man movie that doesn't feature Spider-Man. We're talking about Madam Web. And before we get into the review proper, a couple heads ups, I guess. First and foremost, I have timed this to drop as soon as the review embargo lifted, because I just wanted to make sure that my scorchingly hottest takes got out first thing right away. I'm not trying to say I want to be first, but I want to see if I can actually get my review out before my friend with the hair and the jacket this time around, and see if I could get some of that sweet, delicious clout that I seem to be not chasing. But before we get into that, I have two announcements I would like to make. One is a pretty big one. But before that, I want to let you know that my other podcast, Two Mikes, Too Furious, Animated Transformers, has made its triumphant return. We've put out 3 episodes so far, and a couple more in the can coming up in the next couple weeks. And we're pretty excited about it. And if you just happen to be stumbling upon this podcast and don't know what I'm talking about, I host another podcast called Two Mikes, Too Furious, where me and Michael Andrews talk about Transformers Animated, one episode at a time from 2 different points of view. I have never watched Transformers Animated before, and he is a serial rewatcher, a big-time fan. So we watch the episodes together, and we've just started season 2, and it's going great, and it's a lot of fun. And if you like my particular brand of nonsense, then you will definitely like Two Mikes, Too Furious. That is a ton of fun. And keeping within the theme of the Transformers, I also want to make a huge announcement that I will be attending TFCon LA coming up first week of March. TFCon Los Angeles returns. TFCon is returning to Los Angeles for 2024. That is going to be March 8th through the 10th at the Los Angeles Marriott Burbank Airport Hotel and Convention Center. I am definitely reading that from a website because that is a very lengthy name for a hotel and convention center near the Burbank Airport. I'm really stoked for this convention. There's a lot of terrific guests. I am going down to meet with some friends, going to get Frank Welker to autograph my Transformers the movie poster, and it is going to be an incredibly fun time. But here, during my Madam Web review, I want to announce for the audience that I will be hosting, and I use that term loosely, I will be hosting the Podcasters Roundtable panel on Friday night, the Friday night of TFCon. That is going to be on Friday night, March the 8th. I don't have the exact time. The exact time has not been announced yet. The schedule has not been released yet. But I would imagine that it's going to be the Friday night slot after the opening ceremony. So it'll be after 6 p.m. There are a lot of really cool podcasters, friends of mine that are already involved. Folks from the Autopod Decepticast and Transmissions and WTF at TFW and Swerve's Bar and More Than Meets the Ear. And I'm thinking they're going to have to bring in some more chairs and more microphones. Otherwise, I've got a huge panel of folks that I'm not entirely sure what all to do with, but I've still got a couple weeks to figure it out. But that is going to be a rowdy crew, and giving us that Friday night spot is going to be something pretty special. So if you happen to be in Los Angeles for TFCon, head over to the Los Angeles Marriott Burbank Airport Hotel and Convention Center for TFCon Los Angeles 2024. And if you're already there, pop in Friday night and check out the Podcasters Roundtable hosted by yours truly. I will tell more stories about that, I'm sure, as we go, because I kind of, as I was joking with some of my friends in a group text, I kind of sort of accidentally volunteered. And so that's, I'm honored to host, but it wasn't necessarily my first intention, but we can kind of discuss that later. But no, I just it's been a while since I've done a Mike Seibert radio, and quite honestly, now that Two Mikes Too Furious is kind of back in production, it might be a while since I do another Mike Seibert radio, which is part of the reason why I wanted this excuse. I went to go see the Madam Web just so that I would have something to talk about here on the main feed. So with that out of the way, I guess let's kind of talk about Madam Web and kind of the state of Sony's Spider-Man universe, which is, I think, what we're calling it now. And I went into this movie with incredibly low expectations, and I think that helped my viewing of it. I wasn't sure if they were actually going to do a press screening for this movie because, as we might get into later on in the discussion, this movie kind of has the stink of death on it, and I will be very interested in seeing how it is received and how it is looked upon and how it is reviewed, because I guess up top it's not that bad, but it's not particularly good. What I told the nice lady with the clipboard was that it is aggressively unremarkable, and it's kind of weirdly irrelevant and really kind of spins its own wheels and doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't really have anything to say, and it's just kind of like a weird waste of space and a weird waste of time for everybody involved. None of the performances are particularly good. In fact, some of them are especially bad. This was a movie I didn't quite know what to do with. I guess going in, owning my own bias, I was expecting a repeat of Morbius. You know, the other aggressively uninteresting Spider-Man movie that doesn't feature Spider-Man. But this movie's a little different from that in that I felt like Morbius was stupidly ambitious and takes a lot of swings and is real dumb. This movie kind of goes the opposite direction. I don't know if it's a response to Morbius, but this goes the other direction and it becomes flat and boring and uninteresting, uninspired, aggressively uninspired. And it's just kind of there. It sets up a bunch of stuff that isn't going to happen, very similar to Morbius. But I guess at this point, I want to talk about a little bit about my journey to watch this movie and read the synopsis from the press release, because, you know, I had said up top that this was the movie the studio didn't want us to see. And generally what happens is the press invites for movies come out, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time. And I got the feeling that knowing that this movie kind of has the stink of death on it, that Sony wasn't necessarily particularly interested in screening this for the press. What I can tell you is that I did. I put in a email to my contact, and they responded back with information about the press screening. And then the following day, there was an official invite. So I don't know if that had come had I not asked. But I get the feeling that this is kind of like something that the studio, not necessarily the reps, but the studio was not eager to invite folks. So I could tell you a couple things about this particular screening that I don't think I'll get in trouble about. First of all, this was a press-only screening with a no guest policy. So that it feels to me, my opinion is that Sony has tried to minimize the amount of people that see this movie ahead of time. The press screening was Monday night, February the 12th. The movie comes out on Wednesday, February 14th. And the review embargo is Tuesday, February 13th at 6 a.m. Pacific time. So if you happen to refresh or got this on your way to work, this is the soonest I could put it out. I scheduled it. I'm recording now. It's Monday night for me. I just got back from the screening. I'm back in the studio. I wanted to get this stuff on tape before I went home and went to bed, so that it is there Tuesday at 6 a.m. When you wake up for it, as soon as the embargo lifts. Originally, the social media embargo was to have been Monday night, the 12th at 10 p.m. So like an hour and a half ago, I could have been tweeting about the movie, but I got a follow-up email from the rep late last week saying, oh, hey, the studio has made an adjustment to the social embargo, and now it matches the review embargo. So at this point, depending upon when you're listening, you've probably seen some vague, dodgy tweets from me saying like, hey, I'm going to go see Madam Web. Ask me anything. And people proceed to ask me anything. And my response to each of those tweets was like, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I will read all of those at the end because I think there'll be some good stuff to talk about there. So I did want to read the synopsis of the movie from the official press release from Sony, because this kind of pushes things in the direction that I kind of want to talk about. Madam Web, in a switch from the typical genre, Madam Web tells the standalone origin story of one of Marvel Publishing's most enigmatic heroines. The suspense-driven thriller stars Dakota Johnson as Cassandra Webb, a paramedic in Manhattan who develops the power to see the future and realizes she can use that insight to change it. Forced to confront revelations about her past, she forges a relationship with three young women bound for powerful destinies, if they can all survive a deadly present. Now that's Madam Web. And I think that's not at all an accurate description of what this movie actually is. It's kind of interesting because as we talk about, like, you know, kind of like the history and development of the movie a little bit later as we go. Incidentally, I should probably have said this a little earlier, but this whole portion of the podcast is completely spoiler free. There are some stuff I do want to talk about at the end, so I will do kind of like a spoiler section right about the time I read all of the tweets and the Ask Me Anythings, because there is some good stuff, but there is some stuff that is spoilerific as well. So again, still kind of keeping it in lukewarm, medium, spoiler-free takes. But yeah, I mean, like I said a little bit ago, I was expecting Morbius and didn't get that. I guess I was expecting maybe a Venom, or maybe a Venom Let There Be Carnage, or something. And I think this is still kind of on that level. In fact, it is on that level. It is that flavor of bland, as a lot of this Sony stuff is, that isn't specifically the cartoon stuff, the Spider-Verse stuff. I make a ton of jokes about the Sony. Let me check the notes here. Sony's possessive Spider-Man universe. So this is a new movie in Sony's Spider-Man universe, or the SSU, as nobody will call it. But it's interesting that the trajectory that Sony has had with the Spider-Man movies that don't have Spider-Man in them. It's kind of a franchise that kind of isn't a franchise, and it feels like this is still kind of spillover from the failure of Amazing Spider-Man 2, where they basically teased a Sinister Six movie that never really came to be. But there's a component of this Sony stuff that I still don't entirely understand. I've tracked down a couple articles and read a couple things, but I still don't quite understand the rights. So basically, this is how I interpret it, is like, Sony is free to use Spider-Man in animated movies. That's where you get Spider-Verse from. But as far as live action goes, they basically have the rights to do movies based on Spider-Man characters. So like Venom, Morbius, Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, all this other nonsense that nobody is asking for. But because of the ties and the deals with the Marvel MCU and Disney, Spider-Man cannot exist in these movies, I guess. The only thing that kind of flies in the face of that is that post-credit scene for Morbius, right? Where a very much not Michael Keaton says, "Oh, hey, I don't know how I got here, but I bet you it has something to do with Spider-Man. We should team up." And Morbius says that's very interesting in his very final appearance in the Sony Spider-Man universe. But this is like a weird, convoluted history with these Spider-Man, not Spider-Man movies, because Sony is still releasing, under their banner, under Columbia Pictures, the Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home. But then, like, I think how this happened, it's been a while since I've really thought about this, but I think what they wanted to do was develop Venom as its own separate thing, where they were going to develop Venom as kind of like its standalone character in its own separate universe. And then I think with Sony having the rights to use Spider-Man adjacent characters, both heroes and villains, that they would kind of graft on a cinematic universe from that. And when I say it out loud that way, it suddenly sounds even less haphazard than the DC extended universe, RIP. That universe ends with a man eating a bug in a cheeseburger. But yeah, so they start with Venom, then it's Venom Let 'Em Be Carnage, and in the same year, or I'm sorry, the year after, in 2022, you have Morbius. And it's fascinating because in the post-credit scene for both of those movies, they take elements of kind of like this multiverse concept kind of established in the Marvel MCU, and they're kind of trying to tie them together in ways that don't necessarily work or even, quite frankly, make sense. And while that has been happening, they've been developing this Madam Web movie, Kraven the Hunter, which has been pushed to I think October of this year. It was supposed to come out in October of last year. I'll have to double check that. And of course, Venom 3, which is apparently coming out this year. So let me get this straight. So we now live in a world where we are going to get three Sony Spider-Man universe movies and one Marvel MCU movie, which that feels very odd to me. So one of the things that I always like to make fun of, and I spent a lot of time on this in my Morbius episode, but I have to pick on the whole conceit and concept of something called Sony's Spider-Man universe, which again does not feature Spider-Man. So I found a Wikipedia article to kind of help me untangle this a little bit, because I get some of the timeline mixed up. Sony officially announced their new cinematic universe based on various Marvel Comics properties and characters commonly associated with Spider-Man in May 2017 with the title, quote unquote, Sony's Marvel Universe. By August 2018, it was being referred to as, quote unquote, Sony's universe of Marvel characters internally at the company. By March 2019, a Sony Pictures Entertainment presentation referred to it as my favorite, the Sony Pictures Universe of Marvel Characters, or SPUMC for short. So we, if you tilt your head, it sounds like spunk. So we'll go see the Spunk movie now. And Sony later confirmed that this was the official name for its shared universe. Again, the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters. Spunk. The title was widely criticized by me, with commentators mocking its length compared to shorter franchise names like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the MCU, and DC Extended Universe, or the DCEU, like me, as well as the acronym SPUMC. James Whipwreck of IO9 questioned why the term Spider-Verse was not being used, to which Columbia Pictures president Stanford Pantich stated that Sony did not want to refer to their shared universe as the quote-unquote Spider-Verse, since it encompassed many characters separate from Spider-Man. But despite this, Sony announced in August 2021 that the franchise had been named Sony's Spider-Man Universe, or SSU, which is what we've got now here today. So if I'm counting correctly, let's see what we got here. We got Venom, Venom Let There Be Carnage, Morbius, and now Madam Web. So we could call this the fourth movie in the SSU, or whatever. So apparently, Sony began development on the Madam Web movie for its shared universe in September of 2019. And first-time director S.J. Clarkson, who's directed a lot of TV, joined as the director in May of 2020, making this film her feature film debut. And Dakota Johnson was added to the cast in early 2022. And as the casting kind of more solidified and more people were added, it became clear that this was going to be some kind of Spider Women movie, or Spider Girls ? With more than one Spider character, because it's like the thing I couldn't get around when I had first heard about this back in maybe it was 2019, maybe it was 2020. Oh, Sony's making a Madam Web movie, and it's like, why? They're gonna make a movie about an old lady confined to a chair that's blind with like bitchin' wraparound glasses that could see the future. That doesn't seem like a particularly interesting character to hang a movie on. And then later, when Dakota Johnson was cast, it was like, oh man, what if we do Madam Web, but like, wait a sec, stick with me. What if she was hot? And I'm sure somebody at studio probably Avia Rod, honestly, was like, oh, good. And I guess that's how a movie gets made like this. As I said, Madam Web is supposedly a suspense thriller that depicts the titular character's origin story in a standalone universe with an approach that was more grounded and gritty compared to many previously released superhero films. Again, it's none of those, but I feel like I'm repeating myself. I want to talk about Dakota Johnson for a few, because like when I first tweeted about gauging interest for doing this Madam Web review. And incidentally, I always knew I was going to do this. As soon as I got an official invite to the press screening, it's like, well, they're going to invite me. I'm going to watch it. The least I could do is podcast about it. So I put up a poll, do you want to review podcast? And yes won overwhelmingly with 62.7% of 59 votes. So hopefully this episode gets at least 59 listens. And most of those no votes probably came in because I put no first over yes. And there were a handful of misfires there. So I did that intentionally just so that would make folks have to look at the options instead of blindly clicking, because I've done polls before where like the answer is overwhelming and almost nobody votes for the second option. And it's like, is it because my preferred option is the one on top? Probably. But with regards to Dakota Johnson, I got a terrific response from my buddy JoeBot. He is at TFJoeBot1 out on the X. He writes, only if you do the podcast with the same disdain that Dakota Johnson seems to have for the movie. To which Lita pops in, second this. And I said that's actually an incredibly interesting aspect of this story that I do actually kind of want to get into, because I think one of the things that's one of the narratives surrounding this movie, and will probably define some of the memes that are actually kind of out there already, is Dakota Johnson has been very upfront about kind of her feelings about this movie. And I have an article I'll share with you in a sec about, kind of the press tour and some of the things that she says. But some of the memes that define this movie is kind of how Dakota Johnson has been talking about it, her involvement with it and her feelings on the character and on the filmmaking process. But I wanted to start off with some of the ways that she describes her character. Dakota Johnson as Cassandra Cassie Webb, or Madam Webb. She's an awkward paramedic in Manhattan who, after an accident, develops psychic abilities as a clairvoyant, which allows her to see future events within the quote-unquote spider world, and is a reluctant hero. In the film, Cassie is depicted as an inexperienced clairvoyant in her 30s, learning her new powers, compared to the comic book version, which is a blind and paralyzed elderly woman connected to a life support system and a quote-unquote fully fledged clairvoyant. Johnson and director S.J. Clarkson sought to differentiate the film's portrayal from this version while embracing the character traits from the comics. Johnson felt Cassie's wit, humor, and abrasiveness were balanced with her compassion, particularly through her sort of forming a quote-unquote sort of family with the three young women after not getting along through the film's events, which stemmed from Cassie being on a unending, insatiable quest to save people after she was unable to save her mother. She was interested in playing a female character whose superpowers stemmed from her mind and by the prospect of seeing into the future while understanding the character's past and present. While Clarkson was inspired by the psychological and cerebral aspects of the character, with Cassie questioning her sanity, which she battles within herself and attempts to understand. Clarkson called Cassie a loner and described her as somewhat abrasive, quirky, and quote-unquote on the outer edges of things, which she compared to the title character of the Marvel Netflix television series Jessica Jones. Okay, so Dakota Johnson is an interesting figure in pop culture and in Hollywood. Obviously a Nepo baby, and I don't see the appeal. I don't think that Dakota Johnson is particularly compelling as an actor. I feel that her performance in this movie is especially wooden and stilted and stiff. I think that that's part of what the character's arc is supposed to be. She is abrasive and prickly and difficult to be around and doesn't understand, like, social situations. But that kind of puts her on a trajectory for having some kind of hero's journey. But again, I didn't like the performance, and it's interesting because I think before I saw the movie, I was kind of prepared to have a take that was similar to I respect Dakota Johnson as a performer and for living her truth on this press tour. But now it's just I wonder if that's just kind of how she is, because this movie's kind of nothing. And it reminds me of one of the first memes that kind of came out of, well, actually, no, it wasn't. It was actually one of the ones that came later. This was post-trailer. But it's all of these promos that Dakota Johnson seems to do for the movie just makes the movie more weird. I remember there was this one promo that came out a couple weeks ago where she talks about her gifts of seeing the future.
So while my character in the movie may be able to see the future, I also can. And I know what the future brings. I know that when you see Madam Web, you're going to love it. In fact, I think you're going to see it twice.
Madame Pucci. Skoro w kino.
I think that was from Russia or some other Eastern European country. But I remember that kind of making the rounds. I found an article on AV Club that I kind of want to skim through because it had the grabbiest headline for the purposes I was looking for here. Dakota Johnson's Madam Web press tour is one for the books. Johnson seems to be less than thrilled with Madam Web, and we love it. I would imagine that some postmodern millennial wrote this. So anyway, a clip emerged from an interview Dakota Johnson did with the Huffington Post, and they discussed that a very particular line from the initial trailer for Madam Web that went pretty viral. Let's give a listen.
You might be aware there was a line from the trailer that went sort of viral. Do you remember that?
What was it?
It was the line that says, "He was in the Amazon with my mum when she was researching spiders right before she died." Do you remember that going viral?
Why did that go viral?
I think it went viral because out of context, people were just like, "What does this mean?" Did you catch that at all?
No. Somebody brought this up, and I have no idea what it's about.
There were lots of memes because I think people were like, "What is?" Just out of the context of it, it was just a very...
But isn't any sentence out of context out of context?
Yeah, very true.
What a silly thing.
There was just lots of bits that were like, oh, that, and that, and that. Do you know what I mean?
He was in the Amazon researching spiders with my mom before she died.
Yeah.
That seems like a basic storyline to me.
Fair enough.
But maybe I'm just underneath it.
No, that's fair.
And they kind of go back and forth a little while longer with Johnson ultimately brushing the whole thing off as silly. It's like she'd rather be getting a root canal than talking about people engaging with this movie. It's hard to look away. And I'm going to step away from this article for some Mike commentary. That line, not in the movie. That is a line for the trailer that is cobbled together from, I shit you not, no fewer than 3 different unrelated lines of dialogue. That line from the trailer is not spoken in the final movie, not the movie that I saw. Oh, mild spoilers. Sorry. Out of context. So, that interaction could be read as Johnson simply not understanding meme culture, which is totally fair and totally fine. She doesn't necessarily have to, but her past appearances have implied that she doesn't really understand Madam Web either. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Johnson shared that this was her first time working with a blue screen, an experience she called, quote unquote, completely psychotic. Quote, there's fake explosions going off and someone going explosion and you act like there's an explosion. I was like, I don't know if this is going to be any good at all, exclamation point. I hope that I did an okay job, she continued. Now, in her recent Saturday Night Live appearance, she did the monologue. She also called the film, quote, kind of like if AI generated your boyfriend's perfect movie. Not an indictment in the context of the monologue, but not exactly a ringing endorsement either. Then again, it seems like Johnson is just really fed up with Hollywood in general, whether that feeling stemmed from this experience or not. Quote, I am discovering that it's really fucking bleak in this industry. It is majorly disheartening, end quote, she said in a recent interview with L'Official. Quote, people are just afraid, and I'm like, why? What's going to happen if you do something brave? It just feels like nobody knows what to do and everyone's afraid. That's what it feels like. Everyone who makes decisions is afraid. They want to do the safe thing, and the safe thing is really boring. Now, the article closes out with, it's unclear whether Madam Web is the specific quote-unquote safe thing Johnson is alluding to here, or if she's just experiencing a sense of general malaise. But somebody really jazzed for their upcoming big, great movie probably wouldn't be this bitter while trying to get people to actually see it. Unfortunately for Dakota Johnson, her frustration is just so damn entertaining. You can see for yourself whether Madam Web lives up to the hype or lack thereof when it hits theaters February 14th. Probably didn't need to read that part. I should probably cut it out, but now I don't want to. I have seen the movie, and it is interesting that how well this article kind of nails it, because that is one thing that I will also say about this movie. It is very safe. And like I said, it's kind of lifeless in that it really doesn't do anything. At least Morbius had the audacity to be stupid. This isn't even stupid. This isn't, it isn't specifically dumb. It isn't particularly bad. It's just not interesting, which is the very worst thing that that a Marvel superhero movie can be. All right. So, and before we move into some of your questions, I got some tweets and some posts on Facebook and Twitter. As I said, I came back to the studio here in Seattle after watching the movie, and something odd happened. I've talked a lot about review embargoes before, and I've mentioned several times now, enough to where you can make a drinking game out of it, that the embargo for Madam Web lifts at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, the day before the movie comes out, which again is never a good sign that you want to hold official reviews. That's why you're seeing a flood of reviews now on your timeline, especially stuff like this, because an embargo is when the studio says, hey, you can watch this advanced screening, but you can't talk about it before a certain date. That's controlled by the studio. So don't get mad at the reps that hosted the screening. Don't get mad at me. As I was talking to somebody on Twitter last night, it's like, I want to be respectful of what the studio reps asked of me, and I don't want to break trust just for the sake of getting clout. But where that discussion came from is I got back to the office, set up, and I was seeing leaked reviews coming through. And it's very, very odd. So I'll read some of those since I have them here, and maybe that'll give me even more things to talk about as we kind of transition a little bit into a spoiler thing. In fact, actually, from this point forward, let's just do that. We'll do a spoiler warning, and I'll say from this point forward, I will talk about more spoilerific things about Madam Web, because there are some things that I do want to talk about. I guess the last thing I will say in this non-spoiler portion is that there is no post-credit scene. I'm just doing a public service announcement. As soon as the titles start coming, you can leave. There is no mid-credit scene. There's no post-credit scene. And the group that I was with the other members of the Seattle Press, we chuckled. And actually thinking it was kind of funny that we sat through the entirety of the credits just for there to be nothing there. So I'll give some more speculation on why that might be on later. But I think to kind of give a clear warning, I'm going to play this audio clip. I'm sorry, I'm telling a story completely backwards now. So I just saw it Monday night. Monday night was also the premiere down in LA, and I think these leaked reviews are coming out of that screening, not necessarily any of the other ones locally, but I haven't done the research to dox any of these fools, but that's my guess. But as we transition into the spoiler portion of the conversation and the review, I would like to play this clip that Deadline Hollywood posted of Dakota Johnson on what excited her about reading the script and working with director C.J. Johnson, and again, spoilers for Madam Web from this point forward.
I was so excited about the idea of a young woman whose superpower was her mind, and that she really starts to embrace it and use it for good, and that she takes these 3 younger women under her wing and really wants them to be the most powerful version of themselves. And so when I read it, I just felt like it was a new kind of superhero movie. It was really grounded in reality. It was more of a psychological thriller. It just felt different.
I don't think she saw the movie, because the movie that she's describing is not what this movie is. And again, I don't want to continue to beat up on Dakota Johnson for being wooden and stiff and emotionless, but even listening to her on this interview here, she's just like, yes, and then when I read it, I felt this. I'm like, I am pretty sure she is a robot. I'm pretty sure she is a robot for sure, or some kind of like pod person clone or something. I'm not sure that she is an actual real person. But without sounding too conspiracy theory here, I want to read through some of these leaked reviews. So some of these came out like shortly after I got out of my screening. But again, these reviews aren't supposed to be up because the social embargo is supposed to be the same as the review embargo Tuesday morning. So anyway, Madam Web is an embarrassing mess. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to read who any of these handles are. I'm just going to steal their content, and that's what you get for breaking embargo. Madam Web is an embarrassing mess. Talented stars wasted on probably the worst comic book movie I have ever seen, filled with atrocious dialogue, awkward editing, and all-around laughable structure. I sat there baffled, scene by scene, that someone approved this. The memes will redeem it. No, friend, I do not think it will, because I think we have crested meme mountain already. Between like the I think you like it so much, you'll see it a second time. I know it because I could see the future. Or like, oh yes, my mother was in the Amazon researching spiders before she died. I think that is the extent of the memes that we're going to get. Now, the cool part about doing this podcast now, recording it without I have both the advantage and disadvantage of having no choice but to come up with my own opinions. Nobody has told me what opinion to have yet, which is why I like doing these scorching hot take reviews. So from what I have seen, I mean, there's I don't know what could be memed from it. And I'll be very interested to see once the movie hits and the embargo lifts and more people possibly don't see it, what those memes could be. Because this isn't Morbius, and there's it feels like this has a lot of the same carryover, but there's no like, and then he said it's Morbin time and he morbed all over everybody. It's nothing like that. It's just unremarkable and boring. And I'm repeating myself. Here's another clip from Deadline with Tahar Rahim on working with Madam Web, writer, director, EP, S.J. Clarkson on finding the psychological aspect of his character, Ezekiel Sims.
S.J. is a great director, always open to conversation, to suggestions and all. So let's say that we talked from the moment I read the script, over the course of the shooting, and even in let's say post-production, and it was really helpful. She helped me a lot to find, the psychological aspect of the character.
Okay, this guy sucks. I don't know what else he's been in, but he is the anchor that drags this movie down by the head. He sucks. He's uninteresting, and he is atrocious to listen to and to see. His bullshit not Spider-Man costume is bullshit. It looks like ass. And I don't know. It's like Nick asked me a question about the Ezekiel character and how it ties into some of the comics stuff. I'll mention that I'll talk about that in just a sec. But basically, in a movie that has nothing in it, having a uncharismatic, uninteresting, repellent villain, a boring villain is probably like one of the worst things that you can have. But yeah, just this guy sucks. I mean, this interview, this 25-second clip I just played for you speaks. He's more interesting and compelling here than the entirety of the movie. Very flat and uninteresting. Let me find some more leaked broken embargo interviews. Madam Web is totally fine. There's really not a lot to say here. The leads are charming. Dakota Johnson is a witchy weirdo. The slasher / Final Destination meets superheroes vibe are there, but there's just not a whole lot. Not a disaster, just kind of there. Yeah, that's I guess that is very similar to my aggressively unremarkable, not interesting, boring. It's interesting though, because the movie is filled with jump scares. But the music and the sound effects does a lot of the heavy lifting. We've heard time and time again that this movie is supposed to be some kind of psychological thriller, and it really kind of isn't. Some of the clairvoyant stuff is kind of interesting. Like I wanted it to have almost like a live, die, repeat, Edge of Tomorrow vibe to it, where, she has the opportunity to learn and improve and do different things. And there's a little bit of that, but not nearly enough. It's really just I don't know where they get the slasher Final Destination aspect to it, because really that's just kind of the diner scene, and that's kind of in the trailer. The spooky it gets is when these hapless teenagers get tossed around to where they're presumably killed. Again, this is a PG-13 movie. This movie doesn't need to be R-rated, and I think it would be worse for it. Because this is in kind of like the safe superhero space where we're Spider-Man adjacent. So that's, you don't need any kind of violence. It's as violent as it needs to be. Light on swears too. I think somebody says shit once, or something like that. And that's just kind of fine. But here's the thing that I always ask about these movies, and I probably should have said this in non-spoilers. And again, if you're here in spoilers, it's because you're looking to get the Easter eggs or trying to get some extra insight that I think is probably too much for a spoiler conversation. But the thing that I always say is, who is this movie for? And I had a lengthy conversation with the rep after the screening, after I gave my kind of little nutshell thing. I told her, the movie's aggressively uninspired and that Sony needs to stop making Spider-Man movies that don't have Spider-Man in them. But we had a sort of lengthier discussion about who is this movie for, not just as a superhero movie, but as a female forward movie. It is written and directed by women and stars women. And my fear is that this movie is going to do poorly, but it's going to do poorly on its own merit. And I will be frustrated that the narrative from the chuds of the world will be like, women bad, that kind of thing, or like, quit trying to wokeify my superhero movies or something like that. Which will make me sad because like this movie is just not good, but it's not good because of its female leads, or the writing or the directing is pretty bad and the writing is pretty bad and the acting is pretty bad. I guess I don't know what I'm saying here. It's like, I guess I don't want this movie to be a failure because it's by and from women. But here's the thing. I don't think it's for women. That's what I think the problem with this movie is that it's trying to appeal to the superhero audience, but not doing it very well. Whereas appeal to the psychological thriller aspect, because that is a genre that I know from firsthand experience, being a very happily married man, that is a genre that lady folks enjoy. And I'm not saying that condescendingly, but there's a version of this where you do it as a psychological slasher horror type of movie with no costumes, no comic book trappings, and you do it like, I don't know, like the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie, where sure, he's the Punisher, but it's in name only. And I don't know, this reminds me of, it's a bad example because that was a bad movie also, but I appreciated the ambition of the New Mutants movie, to where it's like, we're going to take X-Men characters and we're going to put it in a different setting. It's like, what if we had the New Mutants, but they're in a haunted asylum, and you kind of make that out of it, as opposed to making it a more traditional standard, straight ahead, straightforward superhero movie. So I was appreciative of that movie's ambition. This movie doesn't do that. So like every time I see that it's a psychological thriller, I scoff at it because it's a stupid superhero movie with stupid superhero costumes that don't even look good. Costumes in this movie suck. And since we're here in spoilers, they're not in it for very long. There's a reason why you don't see any of the Spider-Women costumes in the trailers, because massive spoilers, there's one sequence that's actually like a flash forward that you see them in the costumes. And then there's a tag at the end of the movie with, oh boy, where you get to see them in the costumes again. This movie is an origin story for a spin-off for these three Spider-Women. And I don't know enough about the Spider-Women character. I'm sorry, the Spider-Women characters. Because like, it's interesting because it dabbles in eras of Spider-Man comics that I know. Like, I know who Madam Web is. But when I see Sydney Sweeney in a black and white costume with flowing red hair, looking like Julia Carpenter, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. Because I really like that version of Spider-Woman from the 90s, where it's like, basically she has the Venom costume, but she's a hot redhead, and Mike in the 90s was very appreciative of that. And you would think Mike of 2024 would be appreciative of Sydney Sweeney in the that same costume with that same look. But here is the problem. Here's the biggest problem with this movie from like a creepy, lecherous perspective, because these characters, these three Spider Women, are portrayed as teenagers. They're teenagers in this movie, so they're not looked at as like sexually objectifiable type of characters. It's supposed to be they're young would-be heroes that are molded and guided by Madame Web to become superheroes later. They're not superheroes in this movie. They're kind of victims, actually. They're kind of like a trio of final girls from a slasher movie. But there's no actual slashing, because like in like these clairvoyant flashback, flash forwards, let's try this again type of thing. Sure, they get kilt off and vaguely like throat lifts and tosses. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. I think maybe there's like a implied neck break at some point, but like, everything's incredibly tame about it. But I found myself as a guy, as a superhero movie watcher, it's like, am I supposed to be looking at these women in an objectifying kind of way? And the movie kind of says, no, they're teenagers. Meanwhile, they're wearing revealing clothes. And I can't say anything about the male gaze, but like I guess for me as someone who is afflicted with the male gaze, it sends mixed signals. So it's like I don't know how me as a certain type of fan is supposed to interact with this material. Am I supposed to look at them, and even Dakota Johnson in the lead also, am I supposed to say like, oh man, these ladies are hot, I'm going to this movie because it's full of hot chicks? It is, but that's not what this movie is. But likewise, though, it doesn't say anything. I mean, maybe I'm just coked up from seeing Barbie a couple times, because that movie says stuff. This does not. And it's very confusing. So at a time where, like, I recently just saw Argyle, and one of the most wretched takes I saw, and it was, it's Kingsman for girls. It's like that's stupid. So I don't know if this is supposed to be Spider-Man for girls. At a time where, when I go on these rants and tangents trying to figure out, quote unquote, who is this for, it usually ends with something that resembles, who is this for? This isn't for anybody, because it really doesn't do anything particularly well or especially right. But as I'm scrolling through Twitter here, I see from this LA premiere from Variety, what does Sydney Sweeney hope that young women take away from Madame Web? ? I have never heard this before. We're going to experience this together.
About being, the four of you all together, these four incredible women growing as superheroes. What do you hope that, especially young women, take away from a movie? Like,
I hope that young women can see, one, they're represented and they can feel empowered, but also that you can choose your friends and family. You can be empowered without supernatural power, and you can do anything you set your mind to.
Okay. This isn't really a movie about empowerment. And it really certainly isn't about female empowerment, because, I mean, again, these three girls spend the entirety of the movie being victims and being chess pieces. They're just kind of yanked around by the movie. And it I don't know. The more I think about it, the more troubled I get by that notion. So rather than repeating myself as I try to litigate that, I'm just going to move on. Let's see. Here's another broken embargo review. Madame Web exceeds expectations! ! Some of the dialogue is cheesy AF. Some heavy-handed product placement. Oh, I forgot to talk about that. And probably could have been tidied up a bit more, but the cast really work magic with what they had. Their chemistry is a lot of fun. fun, and the suits look great. I respectfully disagree, Broken Embargo guy. The suits look like trash, and the chemistry is trash. These girls don't seem like they even like each other. But I do have to talk about the product placement. This movie was brought to you by Pepsi and all of the Pepsi brands. At one point, Madam Web is, well, actually, no, sorry. I don't know if Dakota Johnson knows how to open a can of soda. There is one time earlier in the movie where she is fumbling with a can of Mountain Dew Code Red that she never opens. And there's another time at a barbecue where she is fumbling with a can of Pepsi that she cannot open. Madam Web does not drink Pepsi products, but she'll certainly fumble them around in her hand. And the climactic battle that you've seen in the trailer where there's like a big fireworks display takes place at a Pepsi factory. That's also a fireworks factory, or it's a Pepsi warehouse that's next to a fireworks factory. It's very unclear. Alls I know is that it's a giant neon Pepsi Cola sign that you see at least a dozen times through the movie, and it is obnoxious and disgusting. I guess product placement is kind of how you can help finance a movie. But man, it was blatant. This movie cost $80 million. And so kudos to them for it being delightfully cheap. Like at a time where I talk about being complimentary of Godzilla -1 for doing what they did with 15 million. There was another movie that I was recently very complimentary of that cost less than 100 million, but I don't remember what it is. So ironically enough, I appreciate how relatively inexpensive this movie is when compared to, say, like the $200 million bloated disaster that was the Marvels. So when this movie tanks, it's not going to have as much impact as say the Marvels did. At 116 minutes, it's just shy of 2 hours with credits. That's fine. It's like, sure, you could have chopped off 10 minutes somewhere and tightened it up a little bit, but it's fine, as I always say. I don't know if this review is real or not. Madam Web is everything you dreamed a Madam Web film would be. S.J. Clarkson crafts a brilliant and immersive New York City. I don't want to leave. Johnson as Web sets a new standard for the webbed mistress. Raheem's Ezekiel is terrifying. Music, visuals, cast all create a 10 out of 10 Web film. The reason why I say I don't know if this is real because they have a GIF meme that says walking into the cinema on February 14th, hashtag Madam Web sweep. And it reminds me of something I forgot to mention earlier. I was talking about Tahar Rahim as Ezekiel, and I forgot to read this write-up I found on him also. He says he's an explorer who, while accompanying Cassie's mother during her research on spiders before her death, is searching for a secret tribe in the Amazon rainforest in Peru. He gained their enhanced strength and healing abilities through a powerful spider, as well as clairvoyance, which allows him to see the future until his death, making him obsessively search for his killers. This leads him to hunt 3 young women who have the potential to become spider women in the future. Clarkson said, director S.J. Clarkson said, the character is not afraid to be tense and have a quote-unquote level of ambiguity with multiple layers. He also wears a black Spider-Man styled suit. Ooh, careful what you're calling Spider-Man styled. This thing looks wretched. It's interesting, talking about the Ezekiel character, he's kind of like an amalgam of a handful of different things, because Ezekiel from the Amazing Spider-Man comics, as created by J. Michael Straczynski and artist John Romita Jr., is kind of like a benevolent figure and helps guide Peter Parker in in a lot of ways, and is actually kind of like, quote unquote, the first Spider-Man. And, you know, we could get into like the whole legislation about like the Spider-Verse of the comics some other time that's not right now. I'm not particularly interested in going down that road. I think that all of like the Ezekiel stuff was kind of interesting in the comics for a few, but then kind of got overwrought in concept. But it's interesting to make Ezekiel the primary villain because they're folding in a lot of Moreland, the villain character from that run of comics that I was just talking about. So they kind of took the good guy and the bad guy and smashed them together and made them this unremarkable villain. And regarding the suit, it's black with, you know, again, vaguely Spider-Man styled. And I gotta say that like the markings on it kind of look like Kane, you know, which is like one of the failed Peter Parker clones from the comics and from the Clone Saga from the 90s. If you look at some of the markings specifically on the face, it looks kind of like that. So I don't know if that's what they were trying to evoke here or not, but real dumb. And basically in that paragraph I just read you, that kind of spoils what the plot of the movie is. The central conflict is this Ezekiel guy is haunted by visions of being murdered by a trio of Spider Women. And that is the only action sequence in the movie where you get to see them in costume. And he's haunted by this vision, and he wants to kill them while they're teenagers before they become Spider Women. And then parallel to that, Cassandra Webb, Cassie becomes Madam Web with her clairvoyance due to a spider bite. Okay, no, hang on. Sorry. My mom was studying spiders in the Amazon when she died. And so basically this Ezekiel guy is a guide, a bodyguard of sorts for Cassie's mom, who is studying spiders in the Amazon. He is also looking for this spider. She wants to use it to heal the world, and because apparently the spider venom can cure disease, he wants it for selfish reasons, which are very unclear. I don't know what his motivations are. Does he want to rule the world? Does he want to live forever? It's aggressively unclear, but basically, like, she finds the spider. She's with child. She's pregnant, and she finds the spider. They wrestle over it. He shoots her, and as she gets ready to die, he takes the spider and rocks off. And then I am not joking. I wasn't intending to do a whole plot summary, but like this just kind of unlocked it, and now you're gonna get it. The Amazonian spider people, who are basically they have like a red clay type of makeup or other types of markings on them, so they're red, and then they wear a type of I don't know if it's sticks or how it works, but basically like they have a lattice of intricate strings on their bodies that makes them look awfully like spider people. And basically, like, so they're red with black webbing, but they're like Amazonians, and they take Mama Web to the healing waters of the mines of Mandalore, and she gives birth to Cassie after being bit by the spider, and she dies. We find out later in the movie that it was the bite of the spider venom that gave Cassie her superpowers, but also saved her life through the healing venom, because we find out in a flashback when Cassie enters the Chex Notes spider world, interacts with a flashback, which incidentally, like at one point, Madam Web gets shoved out of her body, like in the astral plane. And I would think if I am any of the producers and makers of the Doctor Strange movie, I'd be like, hey, you can't be doing that, because it is straight up out of Doctor Strange. Turns out Cassie hated her mother because, you know, she was looking for spiders when she was pregnant. Turns out, the baby had some kind of illness and affliction, and she was looking for the spiders in a way to find the cure. Ends up doing so, but ends up dying in the process. Cassie is born and becomes a paramedic? ? Going through the foster system and whatever. The movie picks up in the far-flung future of 2003. So I couldn't figure out where else to put that other than in this vague spoiler section. But that is what kicks off a variety of nonsense with regards to this movie. The movie takes place in 2003, which plants a flag as a prequel of sorts. So this is a prequel to the checks notes again, Sony's Spider-Man universe. And we're avoiding saying a lot of things, like we're embarrassed that we're in a cinematic universe with not Spider-Man, because there's at one point where they're talking about like the Amazonian spider people and refer to them as spider people. There's news footage of Ezekiel running around in his black Spider-Man styled suit, and to where they had the opportunity to call him a Spider-Man and called him a Spider person instead, because you don't want to get sued for referring to somebody as a Spider-Man. But that's setting it in 2003 gives the movie a weird texture. Nobody has cell phones, or people have like early flip phones, a lot of analog phone use. And it's kind of interesting that they kind of sort of capture the period accurately, because, I mean, let's be honest, the early 2000s are like a weirdly unremarkable time. The 90s are over, and the mid 2000s haven't really happened yet. So the 2000s haven't really established themselves as anything. So people are running around in Doc Martens like it's the 90s. You have a lot of bare midriff, lot of tummy in this movie. Got a lot of lady tummy in this movie, as if it's 2003. So the fashion, the vehicles, the technology, it all kind of seems to fit the time period. But I think all of this happens. Okay. All right. I'm just going to talk about it now because I don't know where else I'm going to put it. So this is a movie about Spider-Man that doesn't have Spider-Man in it, right? So Adam Scott is in this movie as Cassie's partner in paramedics, a cat named Ben. We find out immediately through the clunkiest bit of dialogue ever that his name is Ben Parker. Yes, Adam Scott, ladies and gentlemen, is Uncle Ben. And when he's introduced as Ben Parker, it is really with a wink, a nod, and an elbow blow that gets you right in the ribs, to where it's like, oh yeah, and my brother's wife, Mary, is here, and she is very pregnant. Now, why there's no reference to Aunt May, I don't know. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was a reference to Aunt May, but we're not naming characters. That's what it is. So basically, Cassie and Ben Parker are in the lunchroom talking about, and Ben is saying like, oh man, I met somebody and it's super serious. What's her name? You don't get the name. Old Mary Parker is very pregnant. In fact, we go to like the baby shower for what will become baby Peter Parker. And they're like, there's this whole bit about like, well, what's the baby's name? Spoilers alert for the end of the movie. The baby is born. The baby Spider-Man is born. And we don't learn that his name is Peter Parker, because there's still like this bit of just like, oh, well, you know, what's his name? And it's like, wink, because we know, that kind of thing. So why we're messing around in prequel town makes no sense to me. I just don't understand. The only thing I can think of is so that Madam Web can age up to appear in future. I'm sorry, I can't say this with a straight face. To appear in future Spider-Man movies where she's all old and shit. Because even more spoilers alerts. I did not see this coming. I thought that the movie was just going to establish that it's like, it's young, hot Dakota Johnson as Madam Web. Kind of very similar to where you got hot Aunt May in the MCU Spider-Man movies. And I just thought that that's what they were going to do. No, at the end of the movie, at the climax of the movie, Ezekiel is defeated. He is squished, pancaked with the Pepsi Cola sign, but at a cost. Madam Web, Cassie is thrown into the thrown off the building into the waters below. She is rescued by the Spider Women and resuscitated in one of the silliest bits of, I guess we'll call it Chekhov's CPR, because at one point where the girls are holed up in a hotel together, Dakota Johnson shows them how to do CPR, and wouldn't you know it, that at the end of the movie, when they actually need to have that skill, they know how to do the CPR, and Cassie is revived, but at a cost. She opens up her eyes. They're all like, milky blind, like, oh no, is she blind? And I needed a line to say like, oh no, now I can't see. Or like, who's there? Come closer. There's nothing. She just opens up her eyes. And then I guess the implication is that she's blind. Very ill-defined. Until we smash cut to the hospital where she's just like, oh no, where are my girls? Oh, we're here. We would never leave you. That kind of thing. Apparently they're all buddies now. But in what is the closest thing to this movie having an audacious Morbius-like ending. So you've probably seen the quote unquote Madam Web costume that was leaked on a Capri Sun. No, I'm sorry, Ocean Spray juice bottle, right? Where it's Dakota Johnson. She's in like this leather spider motif thing, and she's pushing out a hand like she's gonna hold off dinosaurs or some shit like that. That suit does appear, but not in the way that it's depicted on the Ocean Spray bottle, nor is it depicted the way it's shown on the poster, where it's like she's wearing this a red leather jacket on top of the red leather costume. She wears the jacket throughout the movie, but she's just wearing like a snug top underneath. But so when we catch up with Madam Web, we know that she's blind, and in one of like the worst green screen scenes I think I have ever seen, she's sitting in a motorized wheelchair looking out a discount Batgirl clock tower window that kind of sort of looks like a web, but also kind of doesn't. Kind of looks like Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, but kind of doesn't. And so you see she's in a motorized wheelchair, and that she has the most ridiculous blind person glasses on. I think they're trying to kind of evoke what the glasses look like in the comics, but don't do it very well, because like I think they're like still like Prada glasses or something. There's some kind of name brand on the side. I didn't clock what it was, but it looked real stupid. But we find out that the four of them are now living together. The three soon to be Spider Women have I guess are taking care of Cassie in this weird not clock tower apartment type of thing. And the question I have is like, so did she adopt these girls? Because they're kind of orphans, but not really. They're orphans in the way I was an orphan in the 1980s wearing a key to my apartment around my neck. It's like I had parents, I just never saw them because they worked. That's what the deal is with these three girls. Like, one has a dad who's been deported, so she's kind of living on her own. Not specifically an orphan, but kind of. Sydney Sweeney is, I think, in like a foster home because like her dad or mom, her mom is in a mental institution, but she lives with her dad and his new wife and their kids. So she's kind of like the third wheel and is kind of unwelcome, but again, not an orphan. And then the other gal, kind of the same thing, like apparently she's rich, her parents are rich, and they're always off jet setting and don't want to be bothered with a kid. And she lives with the housekeeper. Again, not an orphan. But at the end of the movie, they're all living with Madam Web in a way that, again, does not make any sense to me. But again, this movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So where do we want to go from there? Because I think that's the end of the movie. There's no post-credit scene. Let me take a look through and see if there's any more reviews. Mark my words, Madam Web will surprise us all. No, it won't. Madam Web's live-action debut left her tangled in her own web! ! Stripped of Spidey references, it's like Sony trying to cover up a bug bite with a Band-Aid. Now her comeback hinges on the audience reaction, will they help untangle her from this sticky situation? Okay, all right, fine. One more. I watched Madam Web and it was bad. I tried to give it a chance, but sadly the poor execution didn't help. The cast was awesome, but the performances were definitely disappointing. So many reviews pouring in for Madam Web, not many positive opinions on Sony's latest installment, tons of negative feedback. IDK, how a company can go so wrong with the accomplishments they have had with the Spider-Verse movies. You mean the cartoons? Because that's all you got. That's all you got. Madam Web is awful. I tried to enjoy it, but sadly the poor execution wouldn't help it. The cast is definitely great, but the performances were definitely disappointing. Sony gotta stop making these. And finally, Madam Web is the movie I've waited for all my life. I laughed, I cried, and I cheered like hell. Was it perfect? ? Maybe not, but this latest S.J. Clarkson adventure shows there's still some life in the movies. Marvel is saving cinema. Whew, that's a take. Well, if you like this, you're going to get more of it. Also, I can't find the specific posts, but I saw I think Sydney Sweeney was posting behind the scenes pics of she's upside down in the Spider-Woman costume, and some of the other actors as well. And it kind of took on a tone of oh no, these people think they're in the MCU, much like my dude Tyrese thought he was going to be in the MCU because he was in Morbius. And I wonder at what point it's a bait and switch. It's like, hey, we would like you to be in a Marvel movie from Sony. That's a Spider-Man movie without Spider-Man in it. That kind of thing. I think it's a real bait and switch thing, especially somebody like Matt Smith, who got totally rooked by Karen Gillan by accident because they went to Matt Smith about being in Morbius, and he's like, I don't know about that. So he goes to his good buddy Doctor Who co-star Karen Gillan, fresh off of them Guardian movies. Nebula, now one of my favorite MCU characters. What an arc that character had. But she's like, yeah, man, it's great fun. It's awesome. You should totally do it. But I think what some of these folks don't realize is that these are different cuts of steak. It's you got the Disney Marvel MCU, and then you have the Sony Columbia Pictures, Sony Pictures universe of Marvel Spider-Man characters or whatever the hell that spunk was. And I feel bad for folks that kind of get trapped in that web, pardon the pun. Okay, so to close out here, because I think I got everything off of my chest. The product placement, the bad costumes, the bad villains, the ludicrous connections to Spider-Man without saying Spider-Man, having baby Peter Parker but not calling him Peter Parker. Uncle Ben is a paramedic and apparently an ex-army vet as well. What else? I'm trying to think of just like Easter eggs that I clocked as I went. All right, so a couple comments. So I posted on my Facebook a title card, that they showed before the movie, and I am still I was expecting a dark blank screen because I felt like this was the movie that the studio didn't want us to see. But my buddy Chandler, he comments, "It's flopping time," and it's not going to do well. Nobody's going to see this because it's not for anybody. Noah asks, details, please. And I said, I can't talk about it until tomorrow. Go back in time and listen to this podcast, start from the beginning, and you'll have your details. The one and only Burr Martin comments, I've watched the trailer several times and still have no idea what's going on. I've just seen the movie and I don't know what's going on. A whole lot of nothing. Nick asked me if about recording a podcast, and the thing that he wanted to know, let me just read it here. So I want to know how they pulled this movie off and if it's as bad as Morbius. It's not as bad as Morbius. It's not better than Morbius, but it's a different kind of bad. Like, this is bad because it's weird and weirdly unremarkable and unambitious. Morbius is bad, but still also flat and boring. So I mean, I guess they're kind of a kind. I would throw this in the same bin as Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Like, there's something about these Sony movies that they're just not good. They're just they're just not right. I don't know. But also, though, as I was expecting from Morbius, it never transcends into so bad it's good. It's just kind of bad. It's just kind of flat. So Nick also asks, with using the character from the J. Michael Straczynski Spider-Man run with John Romita Jr. on art, will the spider totem idea be in play? No. Absolutely not. They don't even touch any of that. Like the closest they come into was with the Amazonian spider people, and that's not quite spider totem enough for fans of that comic run. And go check out those comics. Like there's some interesting stuff in there. Like Aunt May discovers that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and there's some other cool stuff with the Ezekiel character. Like, he's portrayed as not trustworthy, or working at opposite agenda or opposite purpose from Peter Parker, who ends up being an ally while trying to protect him from this villain Morlun, who is more or less like a spider vampire, that kind of thing. So I mean, it's some fun stuff there, but if you're a fan of the Ezekiel character, you will be disappointed with this portrayal, because it kind of recontextualizes him as a unremarkable villain that just doesn't wear shoes for no reason. Because within the context of the movie, they say that he's some of the spider powers, and we're really trying to skirt, again, not trying to make him a Spider-Man, but apparently you can grip walls with your hand, so it's more crawling. You can't actually walk on walls, even though the dude runs across a ceiling in a diner one time. It's very confusing and very inconsistent. So anyway, no spider totem, and kind of like a clumsy telling of that thing of the story. So okay, let me find some of these questions. Okay, so I took to the Twitter and I said, ask me anything. From Destron Peter, yes or no, ? Easy enough. No. It's not a seeing is believing. It's not as so bad it's good. It's just flat and unremarkable. Again, very similar to Morbius. From Shane DePayne, asks, any link to the MCU Spider-Man? No. The closest we get is through the vague prequelness of it being set in 2003, with the implication that the baby is Peter Parker and will grow up to be the Tom Holland Spider-Man, I guess. But if it's 2003 and we know that the MCU more or less kind of takes place in kind of sort of real time. So when you get to like that end game, so we'll do 2018 minus 2003. Spider-Man is 15 years old. And I guess that's right for, 25-year-old Tom Holland running around. So I guess that checks out. That's not as off the mark as I thought it was. But I see what they were kind of doing that. Volt Primus asks, is it shit? No, not really. It's just not good. It's not bad. It's just not good, at risk of repeating itself. I have seen worse. Do I recommend it? No. But do I say avoid it like the plague? Also no. This one cracked me up. From D Maximus Prime. I am so sorry, but every time I see something for this movie, all I can think is, quote unquote, I've actually seen a spider person's boobs. And you're not wrong. And I'm going to leave it there. Whirl asked me my favorite color, to which I said blue. I'm more drawn to navy, but I celebrate the entire catalog, which is the correct response. From Whirl. I also mess around with a cobalt. I can mess with an indigo as well, and I do like a sky blue as well. I had a conversation with somebody named Sarah on Twitter where we're going back and forth about leaked reviews saying it's a surprisingly decent movie. And then that's kind of where I veered into this rabbit hole of finding all of these broken embargo interviews and figuring out which embargo is which or whatever. But they seem genuinely interested in the movie. And I'm always for folks making up their own minds. This podcast is really me just trying to get it out of my system. I'm glad that you like it and that you're entertained and that you are one of the 50-some people that voted for this. You wanted it. Now you got it. But yeah, I very rarely do I say do not go see that movie. So yeah, I mean, seeing is bleak. And actually, no, I tell people not to go see movies all the time. What the hell am I talking about? I think it's more from the perspective of like, it's something that my friend Anthony, tfu.info, says all the time. Let people enjoy things. So if you roll up to me and say you're excited for the Madam Web, I say good for you. Go out and enjoy it. And I hope genuinely that you get what you're looking for out of it. My buddy Joe, who now writes reviews for another local radio station here, had wrote and said, if they had bothered to book the IMAX auditorium and allowed for +1s, I'd have bitten the bullet. Couldn't have handled this alone. To which I'd say, well, you'd have me, buddy. We'd be each other's +1s. But I take the point, and it goes to that point I was making earlier that the studio does not want critics to see the movie. And I didn't make this point clearer earlier in that it was a press only screening, no +1s, no guests, but also no civilians. So usually these press screenings are also promotion screenings where like the general public gets tickets either through like giveaways, radio stations, TV, local stores, whatever. So you get a good cross section of actual folks. And Cave Mouse asked me, did the movie stinky or did the movie smell flowers? Well, it's no Mountain Dew review, but it's in the middle. Actually, so is the movie stinky or does it smell flowers? No. It would be like if you have a broken nose and you can't smell anything. That's what this movie is. And finally, the last question here from Rodimus Convoy, Rodimus Convoy 13. Why do we hate this movie before we've seen it? ? I'm genuinely wondering. Well, I don't know if there was anything in my tweets that said that I hated it. I don't hate this movie. And I mean, I guess it's the royal we, and I think it's because it doesn't really have a place. It's a Spider-Man movie without Spider-Man. It's a movie an origin story for a character that nobody knows who they are, and those that do know who they are like, her? Really? You give me a Madam Web movie before you give me a Black Cat movie? What are we doing? That kind of thing. Like, it kind of makes no sense for this movie to exist, and it doesn't make a case for its own existence, which is incredibly frustrating. So I'm not coming at it as a hater, though I will say that owning my bias, I did go into the movie looking for a hate watch. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, I see what they're commenting on. Why do we hate this? Why do we hate this movie before we've seen it? I'm genuinely wondering. I forgot that I put up a snarky tweet of that promotion title card before the screening started, and it says exclusively in movie theaters in premium large formats and IMAX. And I wrote, being a smart mouth, the audacity of this movie! ! There's nothing here to see in IMAX. There's nothing to see in large format. The only reason that you would want to see this in a movie theater is to get the sound design, to get those jump scares. I jolted more than a couple times because the sound system was very, very loud, and those jump scare effects were also incredibly loud. So all right. Well, and I think that's about it. Oh, shoot. One last thing. I forgot to mention this earlier when I was talking about the Madam Web costume. The movie ends on this weird flash forward where we go into the future time again with the three Spider women being adult people now, and with Dakota Johnson's Madam Web, who's like now paralyzed in a chair, kind of floating around them in a weird ethereal type of thing. I think maybe she like does like some astroplane nonsense or something. But like, so she's in the red leather costume, but she has like these atrocious looking red wraparound gargoyle glasses that again look very reminiscent of the comics. And I don't know, man. It's just like I've compared this a lot to Morbius, and I've talked a lot about Morbius, and this is the closest this comes to the unfulfilled promises of Michael Keaton returning as the Vulture to team up with Morbius to hunt Spider-Man or whatever is going on in that post-credit scene. But like this thing where you realize at the end that this is a origin for a spin-off for three different characters. Like, is this like a team, or are they like the spiders of prey, or something? Because none of these people are getting any more movies. None of these characters are going to appear anywhere else. And in some of the write-ups I read you earlier, it said something about it being a standalone, and it's like, fuck you. It's like, quit setting up things that are not going to happen unless you're going to have the audacity to make it so gonzo and so bonkers that I have no choice but to talk about it. On the other side of this conversation now, it's all just weirdly unremarkable. Again, like I said, with a little bit of sarcasm, it's like, well, you asked for it, and now you got it. And I do want to thank everybody that voted in the poll to help guide the show. But yeah, I think that's it, folks. And that's going to wrap things up for this episode of Madam Web. Thank you so much for listening and hanging out. And if you want to listen to more Mike Seibert Radio, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever the heck else you get your podcasts. Like, share, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you'd like and what you'd like to hear more of in the future. And don't miss the return of Two Mikes, Two Furious animated Transformers. And if you are at TFCon LA from March 8th through the 10th, stop by and say hi. I have Mike Seibert Radio Podcast buttons I will hand folks, as well as a name tag that says, hi, I'm Mike Seibert. So stop by and say hey. But for now, my name is Mike. This has been Mike Seibert Radio. And until next time, till all are one, make good choices. Mike Seibert Radio is recorded in Seattle, Washington. Our original theme song is written and performed by Lucia Fasano. Get her music on all streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, and check out her Instagram at Lucia_Fasano. Our closing theme is a nice place to visit by these young fools, used with permission from Michael Geissler. For more music like it, check out Michael's website, bytormusic.com. Special thanks to Andy Lita for our logos and graphic design. He is at GoGoAndyRobo out on Twitter. Become a Mike Cybertronian and join the MSRP Friends and Fans Facebook group. And you can follow me on all the social medias. Most of the social medias at Mike Seibert Radio. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And check out my YouTube channel for even more videos, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Want to be a guest on the show? Send me an email, MikeSeibertRadio@gmail.com.